Degrees are wonderful, education is awesome, but in any interview that you've heard for a successful company, no one said, I attribute all my success to my MBA or to my PhD. You've never heard that, right? Or maybe you have, but actually,
they weren't
no.
the ones that got hired. So.
Right. So having those things is wonderful, can be very helpful, but it's not an unfair advantage. So all these things, and it can probably come with a long list of things that are not unfair advantages. They have one thing in common, and they can all be copied, bought, replicated, acquired. So someone else can acquire the same thing, right? So your unfair advantage no longer becomes an advantage because someone else can produce the same thing. So think about this. What if you have a great idea or great business and then a big company copies you? Or what if someone else smart that you know runs with the idea? Or what if there's a totally free open source product or solution that you have or that can compete with you? What if one of your employees, you're starting a company and you hire someone awesome, very ambitious, and then they're like, you know what, I can do this better on my own, and then they run on their own and do it, How can you compete with that, right? Or what would you do? And then they move to China and then sell at a tenth of the price. So even though you started out with a really cheap price, but that's you thought was your advantage, how can you compete with much cheaper labor? So will your business survive if someone does this? If someone copies you, if someone runs with the idea, if someone sells at a cheaper price? And really, whether your business will survive or not, those are the unfair advantages. And I'm not saying that you cannot survive in this environment. Maybe this is such a harsh word, but I think you have to think about, will I survive if someone else is providing exactly the same service? Okay? So after having painted such a gloomy picture, let's talk about some unfair advantage, or examples of unfair advantages, or things that you can really do to make yourself stand out. So the one thing, or the first thing that we can talk about is inside information. And when I say inside information, you think of the stock market, right? But this can really apply to a lot of industries. Let's say I am, and this again may not apply to everybody, but Dale mentioned I have a PhD in cancer biology, right? So I'm engrossed in the science field. I also do web design and web development. So let's say I come up with, or start learning about a programming language like PHP or some other programming language, and then as I get more involved in that language, I start to go back and realize, wait a minute, cancer biologists or scientists have this major problem, and that can be addressed with something that I can offer a solution for using my programming experience, right? So I'm integrating two things that are very hard to combine to come up with a solution very specific to a specific target audience. Does that make sense? So that could be an example of inside information. When you integrate a unique combination of integrated knowledge, if you're able to do that, and again, that doesn't apply to everybody, but if you're able to do that, you'll be able to have a real unfair advantage. And granted, once you come up with your product, maybe someone else will turn around and try to replicate it. But at that point, hopefully you're at version 2 or version 3, so you're way ahead of the curve. The team. So if you're able to assemble a team that has very unique, very specialized, very good at what they do, with a combination of really high-level talents, you can really have an unfair advantage. If you're able to assemble a team around yourself where you're able to really outcompete anybody else, right, that can, again, lead to an unfair advantage.
The S.M.A.R.T team is an example of that. There you go.
It's funny you say that. Authority. Establishing yourself as an authoritative figure in your field. I think of, I'm sure you've heard of Chris Brogan as a famous blogger. He charges, I think I read somewhere about $20,000 a day to consult with businesses about how to use social media, and he doesn't have any secrets. I don't know for sure, I've never met him, but I'm sure all the information he has, it's available free somewhere, right? But people want to hire Chris Brogan because he is Chris Brogan. So he established himself as the authoritative figure in connecting using social media, right? So if you're able to establish your authority or credibility, no one can really compete with that, right? Granted, Chris Brogan is not the only one charging $20,000, but there are very few, right? This is fun. Having a single-minded, uncompromising obsession with one thing. Okay? This kind of sounds cryptic, but, and this thing has to be very crucial to what you do, and it also has to be very hard to achieve. Not anybody can just do it. And when I think of examples too come in mind, I mentioned Apple with design. I've read things that Apple can sometimes compromise quality or can compromise certain things over design, because to them, that's one of the most important things, and it shows. Any Apple product just looks really nice, right? So they're willing to compromise certain things to obtain that product. So if I'm starting a company, computer company, let's say I want to create a tablet, for example, can I really compete with Apple on design? Probably not. But design is one of the reasons why a lot of people buy Apple products. Would you agree with that, Chris? Another example is Google. They've invested millions of dollars in their search algorithm, right? And granted, Yahoo and Bing and other search engines are kind of getting back in the picture now, but everybody knows Google. And when you think of Google, sometimes you think of algorithm, right? Is that right? To me, that's when I think of Google, I think of their search algorithm. So even though search engines are popping up, they've established themselves as the search engine, and the share market shows that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Again, some of these may not apply to our businesses, but I think these are four of the most common unfair advantages that businesses would have. Okay? So let's think about some examples here. I think I've shared this picture. Anybody recognize this person? That's Lady Gaga. Okay. Does she have an unfair advantage? What is that?
She's weird.
She's outrageous.
Yeah.
She's outrageous. Okay.
She's willing to go places other people won't.
No one else would wear a dress. No one else would wear a meat dress.
That's true.
A
Well,
dress made of meat.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
That was disgusting.
But
She's got a huge, like, Super Bowl following.
well, that's okay. That's an unfair advantage, also, right? Having in fact, she has a name for them. She calls them the monsters, right? So.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, she calls them my monsters, my little monsters.
Yep. Does Facebook have an unfair advantage? I think so. I think so. They have a great, people may argue, but they have a great product or a great service, and people like it, and a ton of people use it. Apple, I think we discussed that.
I would say Facebook's is that they've already cornered the market.
Right.
So it's hard for anybody
Sheer
else to get
size.
into it. Their sheer size.
Right.
Yeah.
Similar to Google's algorithm. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
There's Google. What about S.M.A.R.T group? Do we have an unfair advantage?
Yes, we do. I think so, because I think we're all part of it, so that is it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, and you have a reputation. I'm like,
Thank you.
I told Dylan, so I was like, I need to talk to Dylan. And then she'd invite me on Facebook, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't come this Friday. And I've been trying to come for like 3 months.
Wow.
But I've heard about it, and you have a very good reputation.
Thank you.
So it gets out there, so people want to come.
For me, it was just being able to present something today and get everybody's feedback.
Exactly.
There's a lot of people that, companies out there that could give information, whatever, but there's such a diverse group of intellectual capacity here, experience and everything in one room that works together. So I don't know, would that be team or would it be that?
Absolutely, because obviously Dale as the leader of the group and the S.M.A.R.T team, Mike, Kristen, and I, and Aaron, and Angela, we're a team, but also we're all members of the S.M.A.R.T group. We all here, we participate, Karen participates, Susan, Chris, everybody participates, right? And that feedback, you can't necessarily, I don't think you can get that anywhere else.
And I think we have, although people will try and set up mastermind groups on a regular basis, that we truly are a mastermind group.
Yep.
This was like a board of directors for $25.
Oh, well, I like that it's actually
Board of
productive.
directors for $25.
Sorry?
Good.
It's actually productive.
Uh-huh.
Right. Just so many years, going to things that aren't truly productive. So I walk out and it's always been value added for me.
Sure. Awesome.
Well,
Well, this section is sponsored by S.M.A.R.T Group AZ. I'm just kidding. It sounds like a
no, I just want to say that one of the visions I had in the beginning was that there wasn't anything I could go to where I would be intellectually stimulated. So there are lots of tools and contacts and things available, but I walked away from them not feeling intellectually enhanced or stimulated. So that was part of it.
We network, we go to network meetings, and that has its place, but it can't compare.
So,
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah.
You know that you're doing well when others copy you.
That's
So I noticed that other groups started talking about strategy, and they had not been talking about strategy before we started S.M.A.R.T group.
I think a thing I noticed when you go to typical networking is everybody's competing for your attention. And here, it's such a sharing group. You know, when it's somebody's, you know, we're focused on a somebody. And I get something out of that, even though we were focused on, you know, and
Exactly.
when it was my turn, I felt like I gained something from that, but I also gained by just hearing what you're up to.
Right. So this is something we probably shouldn't, I don't think we have the time, but I didn't actually plan on discussing it today because this is something you have to really think about. What is your unfair advantage? And if you don't have one, don't feel bad. I think you will be able to develop one, and over time you'll be able to figure out exactly what makes you stand out, what gives you an unfair advantage over your competitor. Okay?
Am I gonna have to start wearing meat dresses?
That's a vision.
Just do the makeup.
That's actually the exact
Yeah.
conclusion. I'm glad you said that because that's the conclusion I was hoping you get. I'm just kidding.
If only.
Well,
Yes.
does anybody have what they consider to be the unfair advantage? Because it's funny you're talking about this, but as a company and as an individual,
Nova talks about that a lot. We do have identified Nova's unfair advantage.
What
We
is-
joke about it. Well,
What is it? Because I can guess.
okay, what,
Well,
well,
I don't want to guess without.
okay, well, there's actually several of them, but things that cannot be easily duplicated. The fact that we do in-house processing, in-house underwriting, draw our own docs, and fund our own loans. That is not done. Very expensive to do that, and you know, most companies would never do that. We bring in products that others don't have. For example, we do a 203K renovation product in-house. Nobody else
Does that.
For me, on a personal basis, my unique value proposition or unfair advantage is that, yes, I have been a loan officer at Nova going on March will be 12 years here. But what nobody else has done prior to that was to have been a realtor for 17 years. That was in the top 1% of the nation. So because one of my clients is the realtors, and what I can help a realtor, me getting the loan closed and doing that for the client, okay, the realtors need to know that that part is handled, but that's not why a realtor would necessarily refer somebody to me. They're going to refer somebody to me because I understand their greatest problem isn't, do you return my calls? Their greatest problem is, how do I get my next client and what do I do?
Right.
How do I grow my business? How do I not become a statistic that's
So
out of the business?
That I think would fit under the inside information umbrella.
They're combined too.
The two.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Kids,
Yeah.
somebody else want to share their,
Who's got an unfair
they've
advantage?
nailed it down?
I think
I have no
Chris
idea.
does, I know Pam does.
I have no idea what it is. Tell me.
You don't have an idea what your own unfair, oh my gosh, no, this is the
Well,
good
we'll
thing.
develop it. Yeah.
One of the things that I think is your unfair advantage is, yes, you do as far as the print media, but the fact that you have been a business owner and you have grown a business, that's huge. There are not that many printers, okay, that
I
have
haven't thought
ever
of
owned
that.
their own
So
businesses.
combining my
Okay,
two
well-
worlds.
I'd like to hear, Katie, do you have an unfair advantage?
Well, I don't, see, this has always been tough for us. You can find, I guess our unfair advantage is that all-in-one quality, because you can find companies that do some of the types of lending we do for businesses, because we are business finance, we do nothing consumer, and we don't do home loans, there's no, we're business financing. But you can find a company that can do one of the things we do, but not all of them within one company like we do. And we are, my mom and I are small business owners, speaking with small business owners, just like you were saying. So we know the same stuff that you guys deal with every day. We know exactly where you're coming from. So I don't know from an unfair advantage standpoint. I mean, because you know what I mean, like you said, other people do what we do. So that's not really an unfair advantage, but I've yet to find one company that does all that
Yeah,
we do under one house.
That's the unfair
Is
advantage,
that-
the comprehensive.
But
Just a reminder,
gonna be
we
more
are done
than
at
that.
1:30,
It's gotta
but
be
if
more
people,
than
we have a room until 2, she
Yeah.
was just, she's gotta go
Yeah,
somewhere.
I'll just leave these on the end of the table and then.
Anybody going to the gem show, please stop by the carnival.
Yeah, I'd like to-
Sure.
Yeah, it is like right next to the Holly Dome. Is that-
Holiday, right.
Hey Dale,
Let's
I
just
have a
pass it
question.
around.
Sure, I'll just.
Sorry.
Are we going, do you
Great.
plan on, or when you guys facilitate, or when we facilitate amongst ourselves, small groups to do this?
Yeah,
We could have
let's-
talked about it.
Maybe not
before.
today.
not today,
Well,
but
because we have
not
we all
today.
have to-
no, okay,
down
do you want
there.
to? Let's
Like
have Sherif
offline
finish
or
and then I'll tell you what I'm thinking about for
Sure.
that.
Sure.
Okay.
And
Be
just
safe
to,
out there.
very quickly, just to say,
It's
I mean,
1:35, so.
you know, Bing provides search engines, right? Google provides search engines, so if you're comparing, you know, can I get the same service somewhere else? Sure, you can always get the same service somewhere else, but Google stands out because it provides more quality search results. So just because someone else does it, all the
Yeah.
things you do doesn't mean that they're not, you don't have an unfair advantage over them.
Okay, I guess that's.
So I think there's a couple more slides I have left, but very quickly. So obviously we're talking about the Lean Canvas. So if you haven't done yet, you can go to leancanvas.com and you can sign up. It's free. And once you log in, you'll have a fillable one online where you can enter all the different boxes and you can create as many as you want. I don't think there's a fee for that, but you can create as many as you want. I think it's all free. And as we had obviously discussed earlier, make sure to write a canvas for each target audience, right? So, and define what is your unique value proposition for each of them. You know, we talked about Eddie, you can have different, or you have different unique value propositions, things that you're adding value to, whether you're talking about the employer or the potential employee. And again, relevant terms. So make sure you use terms that, as you're defining your unique value proposition, make sure you're using the terms that they would relate to and understand and really have a connection to. So how do you tie this into social media? It's very simple. You just have to communicate it on Facebook. You know, or not Facebook, you can communicate it on social media. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, depending on
blog.
who you think your target audience is. And LinkedIn sounds like a great tool for the project Eddie is describing, but assuming that those people are actually on LinkedIn, right? You would think they are, but we don't know that. We haven't tested that yet.
Exactly.
And focus on the finished story benefits. So focus on what the problems are and what you can provide, what the value is that you're providing. So you're kind of providing success stories, if you will, not necessarily based on specific examples, but kind of showing the potential of what your service or product can do for those individuals as you're sharing on social media. Again, also, once you figure out what your unfair advantage is, you can figure out how to communicate it on those social media channels. And if you don't have an unfair advantage, I think one of the simplest one you can, well, it takes time, but one of the simplest one you can really start to work on or develop is developing your authority or credibility. And that can be done with blogging, with social media, you know, with Twitter accounts, with Google+. All these can, over time, establish your credibility, and therefore, by default, someone can hire you just based on your reputation, right? So that could be an unfair advantage, or that is an unfair advantage. And I used this in my last presentation last Wednesday. I saw this years ago, and I immediately took a picture of it because this is a little coffee shop, and the guy in the red suit, red jacket, is expecting a really, really big crowd. You know, so can you guess what his unfair advantage is?
He's the only coffee shop from miles away.
Well, he's very enthusiastic, right? He's very optimistic. He's expecting a big crowd today, and you know, if you own a coffee shop that size and you're setting up that line, that says something about him. It may not be an unfair advantage, but anyway, I thought it would be inspiring, kind of cute a little bit. But anyway, I think that's it. This is my contact information, so if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me with any questions, and the rest of the S.M.A.R.T team. And I don't know if we have time for questions, but if we do, I'll be here.
Okay, well, why don't we just go ahead and finish up, and then if anybody wants to stay and ask questions, that'd be great.
Sure.
Next week, we have Michael Gray presenting, and we're going to be finishing up the canvas, and we're going to be moving on to more about managing your social media and tools to do that, and you know, the nitty-gritty of how to get that done, because the biggest problem that I think a lot of people have is being consistent. So not only do you need to know what to say, but you need to say it. And that's what I'm observing, is that consistency just isn't there with a lot of people. It's been suggested that we have a session where we do breakouts, And I know that we'd love to do that. Would this be separate from our Friday meeting, or would this be, it could be a Friday meeting? And I could make sure that we have the whole team here, and we could break out like maybe, 2 or 3 people to one of the team members, to just go over the nitty-gritty of the canvas. So like just getting it done. So I would want to do it in the next couple of weeks.
I kind of thought it might be separate, just because it seemed like it might take a while, right?
What do you think, Chris? I would think it'd be a 2-hour thing, and you'd be getting like one-on-one.
To get through everybody.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it depends on how many canvases or how many customer segments you have. I think you'd really have to zero in on, no more than 2 in canvases, I guess. And then how much you thought about it to get to exactly those 2 where so I think it would depend on the business and depend on.
And there also might be people that don't want to do it. So maybe we should have it separate and be a separate sign-up. Like maybe a Monday evening from 4 to 6, Monday afternoon. Okay, great. Well, thanks everybody. We've kind of run over, but Sherif gave another excellent presentation, and I love hearing all the input that everybody has. So thank you. It's nice having 2 guests too.
Thanks for the opportunity.
You gotta be members. You gotta be members. You gotta be members.
Fridays hard.
Are you part of the conference calls that your mom does every Friday?
No, I'm actually allowed to not be on that. Yeah, but that's the hard part for her, is that's just when it's scheduled, and that's the conference call. Yeah, absolutely.
And then I'm supposed to get together with you, because my,
This would be a good connection. Yeah.
I'm in there.
Okay.
You know,
Whoops, I think I better turn this off.
Yeah, we just need to,